Welcome to this video series of interviews from different companies, and in all these series we are discussing about the interviews and the process which are either cracked by me or somebody else who wants to stay anonymous. But there is enough proof gathered that this interview is genuine, which I will show you in this video also. And also there is a note that all the answers discussed here are mostly correct, and I will explain both the perspectives, like what is the actual answer given by the interviewee and what is the most correct answer if that is not correct. And also, if you found that there is another most closest answer to what is discussed in this video, you can mention it in your comment section, and I will take it from there and update in the description section so that everybody else who watches the video, they'll know the updated and correct answers than what is discussed in this video. This is the interview experience of Vidita for a company called Cognizant, and unfortunately she couldn't clear the interview, but however we'll discuss what are the question and answers, the answers given by Vidita and also the correct answers. So the interview went in 3 rounds. It's supposed to happen in 3 rounds, but this is the first round which we are going to discuss that Vidita has faced. First round being technical, second round being managerial, and third one being the HR discussion. And you can see the email invite over here, what Vidita got for this company, from this company for this interview, and this is for the position of 7 to 10 years, and the skill that is interviewed is API testing, REST assured automation using Selenium with Java, and TestNG, and also little bit of Unix. So let's see this interview. The first round went in for 50 minutes and it has a total of 21 questions. Since the interview itself is 50 minutes, definitely the explanation may take more time. So that's why I'm thinking of splitting this video into 2 parts. Let's see if it is not too length, I'll finish everything, all the 21 questions in this video itself. Otherwise, there'll be a part 2. And if it has to be part 1 and part 2, initially I'll be going to discuss through the Selenium and Selenium automation using Selenium, and some Java questions, and also some Unix command related questions. And in the second part we will discuss purely about API automation and also using a REST assured tool. So okay, my profile actually has telecom profile. I mean it has it is telecom, so that's why we are going to discuss about, there are some questions asked for Unix, and my profile also has many other experiences like using robot framework. So the questions are mostly roaming around what I have done. And to start with, the first question is, tell me about yourself, which is general question which I have answered. I'm not discussing about here. Directly to start with the first technical question, it is, what is ls minus ltr stands for? So since I'm into telecom domain, I will be working on Unix. So these are the basic commands, and there are other commands also which are asked in general, like what is less command used for, what is tail command used for, and how do you, I mean what is cat command, and how do you verify the logs, and how do you do file operations from moving from one directory to another directory. So such general questions are asked, but this question is something which I couldn't answer that time completely. So for this I just answered like ls minus ltr stands for listing the files in a directory, but I was particularly asked for what does lt and r stands for. So that is something it didn't occur to my mind. I am able to talk about l being t being the time and L being the long format, but I couldn't talk about R properly. So now let's see the actual answer. So this is, like I said, it is used for listing the files of a directory. In L stands for long listing format, T stands for sorted by modified time, R stands for in the reverse order. So that is what ls minus ltr stands for. So let's talk about the second question. The second question is about what are the utilities that you have created in your robot framework or Selenium framework. So my resume talks about that I have worked in robot frameworks also, so that's why they have asked, but this is something which is common in any of the frameworks. That is, what are the utilities that you have created as part of your framework. For this question I have answered in general, like there are general utilities I have created, functional specific utilities, and I just explained from my project perspective what it is. But let us see this in detail, and you also can explain this as per your project. But there are some most common utilities that will be there. We'll discuss about that part. For example, you can classify this into two types of utilities. One is the functional utilities. Utility is nothing but where you keep the reusable piece of methods or reusable classes at a place. So each time whenever you want to use the reusable piece of code, you can call it from this utilities which you are creating, and then you can use it or implement it in the class, a subclass, or in the test case where you are executing or doing that action. So that's the purpose of utilities. So in simple terms, it is a reusable code. So that is what utilities are majorly for. So like I said, these can be classified into two. One is functional utilities and other are general utilities. Functional utilities are functionally reusable actions as per your project specific. For example, in your project, if logging in, so in my case the interviewer is very keen that he wanted to know. He literally made me tell the names of reusable methods which I have created, even though it is functional, uh, even though he won't understand the application of what I am doing it. But his intention is to know that I'm able to name some of the functional reusables or utilities that I have created. So some general examples are, if there are some login actions that you do perform consistently, you make it as a reusable utility and keep it in your utility folder. And similarly, there is a certain functionality wherein you can do a refresh of the page at many places in many of your test cases. Then instead of writing that code every time, you write a method and keep that method in the utilities list. Similarly, there is another functionality wherein, for example, if in the telecom world, we have to calculate the call times, the number of calls which a particular user do. So that will be something which we use in many test cases. In case of billing, we call that scenario to bill the number of calls that are performed. And in case of the CRM application where we wanted to see the number of calls, even there we have to call that function. So we have made a utility, we have made it as a reusable function, and I kept it in the utility. So that is functional reusable code. And the second category is generic utilities, which will be you will be using common across your framework in many different test cases. These generic utilities will be like Excel utilities to handle the Excel files, to read the data, write the data, file handling, to read the file, to create a file, to delete a file, and date time methods, string lists to string arrays, and string arrays to lists. So this is some of the many of few general functions which I am using. So that's why I made this as a reusable method and put it in my utilities list. And random number generation, log related few functions or methods, report related utilities. So this list goes on. So I have discussed only few which come to my mind, but there can be more. You can mention this in your comments so that it will be helpful for others also, your experience into your project. Okay, so that's about the second question. And the third question is, what are different concepts in Java that you have used in Selenium automation? So this is a wide topic. I think that's why this section will be like longer. So definitely there will be a part 1 and part 2. So in this part 1 we'll only talk about the Selenium part. Okay, so the third question is, what are different concepts in Java that you have used in Selenium automation? So in any Selenium projects, since it is that you are working on Selenium using Java, so it is inevitable that you use the Java concepts. So some of you may not know, even realize that you are actually using the Java concepts, but yes, you are using the Java concepts. So this is a question basically to understand. uh, it's possible, I mean, uh, there are many people who work on Selenium, but they don't realize that they are actually using the Java concepts in it. Okay, it is quite possible. uh, so for them this is going to be very useful. So you would have already used the Java concept, but you don't realize that you are using them. So let's talk about the concepts and where they are used now. So inheritance is one of the Java concepts. So basically inheritance is used commonly in any framework, and you can also, like, no need to use inheritance concept also, that you don't want to extend, you never wanted to create a base class itself. So that's your up to you, but conveniently many of the frameworks will have a base class wherein they will define all the basic actions that they wanted to perform, which they want to inherit at many different child classes. So when we stick to the common practice, yes, inheritance is widely used, uh, wherein you will have a base class created. That in that base class there are a list of common methods which you will be invoking. So where you will initialize the WebDriver interface, where you will handle the data related sources, where you handle the Excel files, property files, and configure files, and you can define some WebDriver weights. So this list continues. So these methods can be placed in base class, and these are the methods which can be used by all the child classes mostly wherever you are writing the actual test cases. So this way you can just implement, I mean, extend these methods from the base class and use it in your child class. So that's the purpose of it. This will increase the code reusability to a great extent. So you can avoid using this concept also, but this is the most practiced way that any framework will be designed. So that's how inheritance is used. Now coming to the concept of polymorphism. So method overloading is used at many places, where you have to call a method that applies the same logic but for different values of data types. So functionally there'll be places where you are defining a method, but that method is doing certain list of tasks, and the task will be similar but it could be with different values. These situations are common in your projects. So in such situations you can create a method with the same name but just overload it using different arguments by passing to it. So in writing the Excel utilities, you have chances of using method overloading, and also when you're writing utilities for file you can use method overloading. And by default there are many places where method overloading is taking place in many of the functions which are coming as part of the Selenium classes. So we'll see that also. And also polymorphism also relies on the concepts of interface. So wherever you are using the interface, like for example WebDriver interface, there we are using again the polymorphism. How it is used is, let's discuss. So basically WebDriver is an interface, and when you declare a driver, when you instantiate driver, you will take the reference of WebDriver instead of uh, referring it to the Chrome driver as an object reference, right? So the driver object which you are whichever you are instantiating, it can be overridden whenever you want to override with a browser of your choice. So there you can achieve the overriding that driver interface with whichever driver you wanted to work on. So that is also sort of one type of polymorphism. And also again, within the same WebDriver, uh, there are methods that the WebDriver interface has. Those methods can be overridden by the methods of the Chrome driver. Basically, those methods are actually implemented in the child class. WebDriver, since it is an interface, the methods are just acting as a templates, but actually those methods are overridden by the methods which are there in these child classes for each browsers. So you are also doing overriding. So this is by default you are using the polymorphism when you are using Selenium, but additionally you can use these concepts of overriding and overloading when you are writing some methods functionally which you wanted to override or overload in your framework as part of your project. So then another classic example of this polymorphism is wherever you wanted to use weights. So there is driver.manage.weight. There are three weights that manage class is having. This is a classic example of overloading. And also influent weight, again there is this polling every method, which is again overloaded with one argument and with two arguments here. Like this, there are many classes, Selenium classes, which are using the concept of polymorphism while overriding or overloading the methods. Okay, so we covered inheritance, we covered the polymorphism, and next is next concept of Java which is used in Selenium is encapsulation. Let's see how encapsulation is used and where it is used. So most of the projects that are designed for with Selenium framework are based on POM, which is page object model design pattern. So when you're implementing page object model itself, means that you are actually using the encapsulation concept. So you what is it is like you are separating the data members from the rest of the code. So you are actually hiding the data, so which is also abstraction. So you are separating the data from the implementation. So this is something which you can achieve by declaring the private data members and accessing them with the help of public methods. There are some standard POJO classes which you might be defining. POJO means plain old Java objects, which is mostly used in many of the frameworks. So there itself you are using the encapsulation, and even in your POM, where you will create a page separately. For each page there will be a object created, and with the help of that page object you will access different pages by the by method. So in POM classes you will declare the data members using find by, and you will initialize them using a constructor which is init element to utilize them in different test methods. So by default when you are implementing POM, that means that you are using encapsulation concept of Java in there already. And the next concept is abstract. It's a concept that is implemented in WebDriver, because WebDriver, wherever you're talking about interfaces, their abstraction is implemented, which will hide the implementation from the other classes, and the implementation is taken care in the subclasses. And the next concept is collection classes. So you will use collection classes at many parts of your framework. So this is also one of the Java concepts. So these are the common concepts of Java which are used in all the frameworks of Selenium. Also there are many practical examples, many implementations in your project which are functionally implementing again these concepts of Java also. And for collections we'll discuss this in detail in a different question. So let's move on to the next question, which is fourth question. So can a method overloading be achieved by returning different data types? So yeah, for this one the answer is no, you can't achieve method overloading with different data types. I remember that this question is asked in the other interviews also, probably Mindtree interview or HCL interview, I think. So this is again one more question which is repeated. So the answer is no. When you try to do it, it will return in compilation error. So now let's talk about the fifth question. So what is the parent class of object? So here the word object is not referred to uh, the general class object. It is about the object. So I didn't understand. I struggle in understanding the question. In a sense, Vidita. So someone who is good in Java, they will understand this question. So object is the parent class of all classes. The question should be, what is the parent class of all classes? Not sorry. What is the parent class of all classes? So object is the parent class of all classes. So uh, there is no parent class to the object. So sorry. Yeah, the question is correct. This is just to trick the interviewer. What is the parent class of object? So object class itself is the parent class of all classes. That's why there is no parent class to the object. However, I didn't understand this question clearly, so I couldn't answer it. And also, not only that, I couldn't answer the third question also properly. I have answered it in like a vague format. Okay, now let's talk about the sixth question. Since the interviewer has faced trouble on answering the question, the next questions are also related to this one, to trouble the interviewee. So the next question is question number 6. What is parent class of all classes? So like I said, I couldn't answer this question, which means that the interview has understood that okay, I'm not that much great with the Java concepts, the original Java concepts of core class concepts. So he ask me another question like, what is the parent class of all classes? So the answer is object is the parent class of all classes. So this is also something which I couldn't answer. And the next question is seventh question. Where did you use object? So for this question, I thought when he is asking about where did I use object, I thought like he is asking about the objects of classes. So I said that we use objects everywhere. Wherever we wanted to access methods of different classes, we create an object of that class and we'll call those methods and do it that way. But his question is, he wanted to understand like where exactly I use the object called object itself, the class object class. So for this one, it's like there are many places where you can use this one. uh, Here is the explanation I got in. So mostly when somebody is doing a data driven testing using data provided annotation in TestNG framework, there you will return the object type, mostly a single array of object or object of two-dimensional array. So that is the most common use. And also there are many places where you wanted to return data type, or where you wanted to return multiple data types at a time. So in that case, you can keep all the data types in an object and you can return the object. Yeah, that's where exactly these objects are used. So if you know a better answer for this one, and based on your project experience, you will know more about this, please mention it in the comments so that it will be useful for others also. So now the next question is the eighth question. Collections and where did you use them? So like I said, okay, we are going to discuss collections and where do we use them. For this one, I have answered like I have used collections at many places, like I have used lists, array lists, sets, hash maps. So I have told them that I have used this one. And then further I have asked about like where exactly did I use the collections. So he's expecting an example. So I have answered like there are many places wherein I am dealing with a list of values. I have used lists, and I have answered that way, but this one didn't occur to my mind. But this is the better answer which probably the interviewer was expecting me. So the classic example is that there are many places wherein there are many situations wherein you wanted to switch the tabs when you are handling multiple windows or frames. You wanted to switch, right? So the common usage there is set. You will use set because dot windows will return set string. So there it is inevitable that you have to use this concept of collections. So it is a set of string where you will iterate through. I mean, if you wanted to iterate through this entire list of windows and find your desired window and do your action, then you can do it. So this is achieved with the help of set, which is part of collections. And also there are many places wherein you will have to use key value pairs. There also you can, this concept of collection is used. And also as an example, if you are defining the Chrome options, the way you wanted to use the Chrome with some options which you wanted to set there, you have to use hash maps in order to keep some values for the defaulted keys of Chrome options. So there also you can use this concept of collections. So these are good examples. So like this, if you know many examples from your experience, please do mention it in the comments. This will be useful for somebody else. So now the ninth question, stale element and no such element exception and the differences. So you see all these questions, right? So all these questions are basically asked to check the candidate is having the real-time experience or not. So this is the best interview questions I have seen. So yeah, and the answers which I am putting in here also, the best possible answers, and you can always leave your comments with the good answers. So what is stale element and no such element exception, and what are the differences? Okay, answer to this one is like, let us go by the name and try to understand so that it will be easy to remember. One is no such element exception, other one is stale element reference exception. So no such element means like there is no such element present, which means possibly this exception should occur when you are trying to look for that particular web element. So in our classic way of writing operations is like we call driver dot find element method and then do the action. So before doing that action, there is this find element by method wherein you are looking for that element. So this is the place exactly where this exception is thrown. So when the driver is looking for that web element before it performs that action, if it is finding that element, okay fine, it will proceed to do that action. If it is not finding that element in the DOM page, then it will return this error saying no such element exception. Okay, so how do you overcome this one? So when the moment the driver is trying to find it, and if it is not there, then this exception is coming. Most possibly there are many reasons for this one. The most reasons are, by the time the DOM is not loaded fully with that web element. So to overcome this one, the most frequent way is using the waits, using the driver waits. So you can overcome this particular exception. There are other techniques also, but this is most widely used. And talk about stale element reference exception. This is also at the similar to this one, wherein you are not able to find the web element. So but what is the difference in both cases? When the driver is not finding the element in the DOM, then it is returning that exception. But what is the major difference? So the difference lies in at which point this element is looked for. So in the initial case, find element method is where it is looking for that element. In here, the word stale means it is not fresh, it is expired, which means there was the web element but it is expired or it is not fresh. The dictionary meaning of stale is not a fresh one. So it's like the web element was there but it is no more active now. In that case, in that condition, if the if the driver found that element in that condition, then it will return this exception. So this will commonly occur like driver dot find element. So when the element is found, that's fine, no such element exception is not thrown. Now it is going to do certain action. So the moment when it is doing that action, it will be uh, referring to the reference of that web element. By the time after it finding the element and it is trying to do an action, if the web element is not active, or it is sort of expired, not a fresh one, then it will throw stale element exception. So how to overcome this exception is again by using the waits or doing the refresh or by rerunning the test. So when you rerun the test, probably the time the DOM um, would have not that element expired, then you will do it. And there is also another possibility that the DOM gets modified when you are doing certain action. This will action, for example, when you navigate to a screen before it and you navigate it back and you are trying to find, do an action on an element which was found earlier, but this would have expired now when you navigated from the current page to back. In that case also you may see this tail element exception. In that case you just have to refresh the page again or rerun the test again. So these are some of the methods. So for this question, if you have more explanation, please do mention it in the comments. Now let's talk about the 10th question. So what is the parent class of all exceptions? So this is again to test like how much good knowledge you have on the basics of the Java. So answer to this question is throwable class is the superclass of all Java exceptions. So to read more on this one, please visit 4verstyles.blogspot.com. Let me show you that. So this is the website, and here you will see many topics. Okay, rest assured and testing related, Java row to Selenium, where there are Java topics covered, Selenium, Catalan Studio. So this is in progress actually, and you can refer to interview question and answers to see different interview questions which we are discussing now. You just have to click on that particular interview and click on what you wanted to see. For Cognizant, for the current interview, I'll upload it. After that, you can check here. But okay, let's talk about this exceptions question. So you go to Selenium. In Selenium, there are two images: Selenium with Java and Selenium with C#. Now we are discussing Selenium with Java. So go to Selenium with Java. So it will take you to a place where we are talking about. Here I started updating this as well, but for now you can read about exception handlings. So in Java there are, what is exception is defined here, and hierarchy of the exceptions. So throwable is the superclass of all exceptions, and it has subclasses of exception and error, further subclasses in the exception. And what are the different types of exceptions: checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. What is checked exception is exception which is checked at the compile time. The exception, that is checked exception. The exception which is checked at the runtime is unchecked exception. And examples are examples of checked or file operations, input output, SQL injection and all. Examples of unchecked exception which occur at runtime are arithmetic, null pointer and so on. And the exceptions which are in Selenium, what we are discussing, no such element and stale exception element, they are occurring on runtime, so they are actually unchecked exceptions. You can take the help of try catch block to handle the runtime exceptions or unchecked exceptions. So that's all about the first 10 questions, which is about Selenium and automation and Java concepts. The 11th question is about schema validation in API using rest assured. So for this one, Okay, we'll discuss. This looks like we are starting with the API questions. So we'll cover this in part 2 of the video because the length is becoming more. So yeah, see you on the part 2.